1 week season.
Welcome, everybody, to week 11 of Solo Ship. I'm Squirrel Patrol from 444 Football. I'm joined by JM to Win from 1 week season. JM, how was your week 10?
So right before we came on air, you said, I am going to do the ask how your week goes. And I was like, how was your week? And you're like, you got to wait to find out. So I don't know if that's either very good or very bad. Last week was my worst weekend of the entire season. It was on, I came out ahead because I've been super hot betting and actually came out ahead overall due to that. But in DFS, it was on Saturday night. I realized for the first time, like, man, my pool is really small. And I was like, I'm either going to hit everywhere or miss everywhere. And it was the first time this season that I've missed everywhere. Actually, I had 15% H-Hand, so I still had like a shot and had everything was right. It just H-Hand wasn't on the right rosters, and then it didn't have H-Hand on the rosters where I got other things right. So yeah, just a dead week for me. But what about you? Was it all the way good or all the way bad?
It was kind of in the middle. So I finished sixth in the getting the $20 Millie Maker. And I was winning it until the last touchdown, the Jahmyr Gibbs touchdown. So about 3 minutes left in the Commanders game, just kind of hoping, and it's actually a long shot, right? Like Detroit's just going to kind of fall on the ball a little bit. Right? They're just going to run the ball with Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Hopefully it's Montgomery going for 3-4 yards, and that runs off most of the clock. And then Commanders realize they can't come back, and that so they're just pounding it into the offensive line. Jahmyr Gibbs breaking free for the 44-yard touchdown took me out of the Millie Maker. Out of winning the Millie Maker into sixth place, it's the second time this season I would have won the Millie Maker if I'd been playing the 555, which I joked about, that costs $75,000, if you're going to max enter it. But actually I would have $2 million dollars at this point, but it is what it is.
I would almost put your ROI at pretty positive entering, max entering the 555, but that's obviously a big jump to take. I'm going to drop 75K in this, because you need the sample size to be able to play out before you can actually capitalize on that. That's brutal. I don't really I don't play the Millie Maker, and that's not ever been something I've really done. But there've been 5-10 times ever where I've been let me throw 30 or 40 rosters in there, and it was way back in 2015. It was back when the payout for 12th place was $30,000 or something like that, and I spent first place for 3 hours in the Millie Maker. And then the last 10 minutes of the fourth quarters of games get pushed back down. And it's one of those where anytime you have one of those big wins, you have one of those stories of how it just barely happened. Anytime you have one of those losses, it's one of those stories of how it barely happened. So over time, it's going to work out in your favor. Get that second Millie Maker win.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, these things happen. It was close enough, but the thought was just starting to go through my head. Do we have champagne in the house?
Nice.
Case, right? But no, I had a good Thursday night. So again, playing this weekend with house money, and we're rolling into an 11-game slate. It's actually shaping up for me, I think, a very similar slate to last week. There is almost a feeling of every slate's the same, but it's not. Sometimes you get dramatic running back value, or dramatic value somewhere. This is another week where we just kind of have a handful of games right in that 48, 49 range, and then a handful of games in the much lower range, 37 points. I keep coming across like Baltimore and Cleveland. No, Baltimore is not on the slate. No, Baltimore is on the slate, right? They're just playing in Cleveland in a game with a 39-point total. We should still be thinking about them. But I guess starting with the game environments and the shape of the slate, are there any game environments that stick out to you? Maybe, particularly from the 48, 49-point games, or do you think it's not that kind of week?
I think it's likely to not be that kind of a week. I think we always have to think about it, right? And even account for the possibility. Where are the possibilities? To me, the possibilities are Bengals and Steelers, and obviously with the game being in Pittsburgh on that bad field. Home field advantage for the Steelers. Vegas isn't expressing the confidence in the Bengals that we've seen in past weeks, right? Implied team total of 21.5. But would it surprise us if that's another, 31 to 38 games, something like that? Chargers, where the Jags, have generally not done great. I mean, they're not a good offense right now, and they've generally not done great against good defenses, but they did find a way to put up points against Houston last week. And so, it's not all going to be through the offense. There's going to be some short fields or whatever, but if something breaks their way, they did it against Houston, they did it against Kansas City. And if they do that, I think the Chargers can do really well throwing the ball in this spot. And then I think with the Cardinals getting more and more banged up on defense, the 49ers getting healthier on offense, the Cardinals offense playing so well of late with Jacoby Brissett staying on schedule, the 49ers defense so banged up, I think that's a game they could take off. And then Rams and Seahawks very clearly could play to the upside in spite of how good these defenses are. So yeah, I think that all those spots are in play. I think we're likeliest to see no games like really shootout. I think if we get a true shootout, the likeliest is Bengals, Steelers, and Rams, Seahawks. But yeah, that's sort of my take on that. What about you? How are you seeing that side of things?
So just running like optimal-ish type lineups, I think the two games that jump off the page are actually, the San Francisco Arizona game, and I think some of that, like I might end up under the field there if it ends up with heavy ownership, just because I think the reason that game is popping off the page is because Marvin Harrison is out. So you have these like Arizona wide receivers, like Michael Wilson is probably the top one that is really just popping off the page in terms of wide receiver value on a week that is like so far very thin on value. And then you've also got Jacoby Brissett, who's underpriced for his performance so far in 4 starts for Arizona. And then you've got like Trey McBride, who's like, he would be dramatically underpriced as a $6,300 wide receiver. And we have to play a tight end. Like, I actually think Trey McBride might end up being the most underowned player this week, just because people are thinking like, oh, I'm going to either play Trey McBride or get different. But yeah, if he was a $6,300 wide receiver, it would be like massive chalk. I mean, he'll be the chalky tight end anyway, but like maybe not enough.
Right.
And then it's easy to run that all back with Christian McCaffrey. Having said that, I don't know if a game should be popping off the page just because one of the star players on one of the teams got injured, leaving everybody else as like as seemingly as a value. So I think that game's okay, but I think it'll be the highest owned like game. And so I might own it at or less than the field. I think Cincinnati and Pittsburgh is like the second game you mentioned. You seemed a little bit like down on it with the field. I don't know. I think Jamar Chase is just in a good spot, but it's also really hard to distinguish between like Jamar Chase, JSN, and Puka. And then you've got the two running backs there, Jalen Warren and Chase Brown. I probably have like much more confidence for the price and ownership in Chase Brown if Samaje Perine is out. But like Jalen Warren is playing against the Bengals rushing defense that we wanted to pick on all season, like just playing with the running back against the Bengals has been a good choice. So yeah, I don't know. I think that those are the two games that pop off the page to me. And then I was liking Chicago and Minnesota, kind of becoming like JJ McCarthy truther or something that like he's just on his he's on his 5th NFL start, I guess. He has rushing ability. He just set career highs in rushing yards and passing yards for a game, and he's playing a Chicago defense that isn't that good. But actually, maybe I'll then segue into this other game that was not really on my radar until I was doing my last show. But yeah, Seattle and the Rams. They are two of the best scoring defenses in the NFL. And I was doing the numbers before my last show and realized they're actually also two of the defenses that allow the most receptions per game in the NFL. And you've got Puka and JSN there. So I guess, do you want to talk about that game, like why you like it, and then also kind of compare JSN Puka against Jamar Chase?
Yeah, I do want to first hop over to the Cardinals game because I think that we can understate what Brissett and McBride have done. Like, you can't find $11K in salary that's kept you on a 200-point pace for 4 consecutive weeks, and they've done it. And they're playing really their best matchup of this stretch in a game where I think the 49ers offense should do well and push them. So I think I'll look at it like this, the way I see the shape of this week, let out talking about game environments, right? I'll pull this back over to Puka and JSN in that game. But we let out talking about game environments. And what I've seen is like kind of the core structure of this week is there's at least 5 guys on this slate that I think can go for 40 points, or 4 guys who can go for 40 points, 40 or more. And again, maybe none of them get there, but like we want to account for that in our thinking. Those 4 guys being Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, Puka Nacua, JSN, and then also Rico Dowdle, who like at 6,800 can put up 30 to 35, right? So we've got and Trey McBride as a guy who can put up like 35 plus. Like price considered, he and Rico Dowdle are in this category. Like there's some guys we got to account for. Like these guys can put up monster games, and maybe you need 3 or 4 of these guys on a roster, and maybe there's no game environment that takes off. So I look at Brissett and McBride as super valuable this week, not just because the ceiling is there if you get the run out, but also even if you don't get the run out, they're probably still getting 40 to 50 points because they've done it 4 weeks in a row, and this is their best matchup. And there's no Marvin Harrison Jr. And so like, then you're staying on the 200-point pace for the salary spent, and you're like, it's a little bit easier to fit in 2, 3, 4 of these guys that we need to go out of our way to try to think about. To me, those top wide receivers, I rank them JSN, Chase, Puka. And the reason is Reeves had this stat that JSN is, I think, the wide receiver 74 in routes run. And he's 8th in NFL history in like yards per game to this point in the season. And so he's averaging 24 routes per game. If this is a competitive game and we all of a sudden get 32, 35, 37 routes against a Rams defense that is really good in the front seven and their one weakness is the secondary, like I think this could be, again, we're not into projections, and I think people who are watching this show in particular like understand how we're thinking about DFS. But like in terms of range of outcomes, like this could be one of those 11 catches, 200 yards, 2 touchdown games, you know, where it's like, oh, remember that week where you had to have JSN because he put up 40 plus points. Puka, it's like Seattle is such a tight window, like force you to get the ball out quickly, throw it short type of team that I think Puka's going to see the targets, but it's going to be like more of the battering ram style where it's not like a bunch of downfield looks. It's a bunch of like, you know, short and intermediate looks, and they're just trying to get the ball in his hands. He's, you know, a bunch of guys are hitting him and he's trying to break through tackles. And so I think we easily get up into the 20 to 30 point range for Puka. I think he's got a harder pathway to getting up to like 40, which I think JSN has a clearer pathway to 40. I think Chase has a clearer pathway to 40. So I rank them in that way. But yeah, I think this game, it's like 2 really good defenses, but also just 2 really good offenses. And a lot of times when we see that, like offense has the upper hand in the NFL. We know that if an offense isn't shooting themselves in the foot, if they're not like for anybody who watched that Patriots Jets game last night, like how many opportunities did the Jets have to make that a game, right? Where Adonai Mitchell drops that pass, and then there's the slightly off target throw to Adonai Mitchell again on like that back shoulder type thing, and he drops that one, and bad throw, and like there's some other bad throws from Fields and some other drop passes, and you're like, man, like a lot of times just offenses beating themselves, right? Well, the Seahawks and Rams are not going to beat themselves, and the defenses are good, but like, are they good enough to really counter what these offenses can do? So yeah, like it won't surprise me if this is a 41 to 38 type of game. And if that happens, Darnold plus JSN, you know, maybe even Kyron Williams, maybe Stafford, like there's a lot of ways that this game could really play to the upside. So I think it's a game we're going to account for. The easiest way to account for it is just be like, JSN's the dude. And I think this is a spot where you really have to think about finding a way to play him. But yeah, it could go across the board. It could end up taking off in this spot.
Yeah. So I think the key thing for this game for me is that the scoring defenses, they're 2nd and 6th in the league in preventing NFL scoring. The game has the highest total of the week. It's 48 and a half. Like, and they, you know, and they give up a ton of receptions. So like, two receivers that are, you know, reception machines. Like, oh, this is a game that's like, oh, I'm, you know, like I don't necessarily want to, you know, play Puka against Seattle or JSN against the Rams. Well, I know, like maybe I should, especially if they're in the same game. A note on JSN, because like I think it's interesting. I kind of lumped all those receivers together, and you kind of hit on some of the numbers. Jackson Smith and Jigba is leading the NFL in receiving yards by 210 yards. Okay, we're only 9 games in for those guys. Like he has 210 more receiving yards than Jamar Chase and the same number of receiving touchdowns. Like he's got 25% over the next highest wide receiver in the league.
Yeah.
Like, actually, maybe we shouldn't be lumping those guys together. Maybe it should be JSN. And then like, well, who between Puka and Jamar Chase? But, you know, obviously things are all matchup dependent. I actually, you know, you've mentioned like the Tampa Bay and Buffalo game. I wanted to like touch on Josh Allen in that game. I just, you know, my Millie Maker lineup was like plugging Josh Allen all week. I think I had him as my number 1 quarterback. And then it was Davis Mills that was in my Millie Maker lineup. Like thus, you know, saying, you know, kind of showing why Jacoby Brissett at 4,900 is a guy that maybe look to before Josh Allen. But any interest in Josh Allen or the Buffalo Tampa Bay game? And I'll note that there are some potential weather concerns for that game.
No, yeah, I think it's one of those games that similar to Patriots and Bucks last week. You open up the slate and the initial instinct is like, oh, this game's exciting. And then the deeper you dive into it, the more it's like, is it? And so there are obviously pathways to that game taking off. Look what the Bucks and Seahawks did. Look what the Bucks had done in a bunch of games last year. But this is, I think when you kind of play out the game through Sims or in your mind, however you do that type of thing, like it's hard to see the pathways to the lid coming off the game, right? Because if you're the Bucks, I think they're like 23rd in offense, like over the last 5-6 weeks. Like they haven't been great. You know, they're banged up. They haven't been great. They're playing a Bills defense that is really good against the pass, really bad against the run. And the only time they get bad against the pass is if they have to sell it to stop the run. And then you kind of get that, you can hit them in all areas. But if you're the Bucks, you're probably leaning on the run here because that's your clearest avenue forward. And then if you're the Bills, like the Bills don't have Josh Allen put on the Superman cape unless they're pushed to do so. And so, this is a game where for me, like I think I'm going to play 3 or 4 rosters this week instead of my typical, 10, 12, 15. And right now it's like Brissett and Flacco are going to be 2 of the quarterbacks that I play. And then the question is just like, do I just go Brissett and Flacco on all the rosters, or like, do I have a third, a fourth quarterback come in? And so Josh Allen's like probably 5th or 6th on the list because I think it is viable. I think there's a pathway to this game taking off, but I think it's like, especially when I look at like, how do I fit Christian McCaffrey and JSN or Jamar Chase and JSN, Puka and JSN? It's like, well, going down to Brissett, going down to Flacco really makes that a lot easier to do. And I think we probably get similar scores from these quarterbacks. I think Josh Allen, is probably going to have more like the 22, 24, 26 point game instead of the 35, the 40 point game. And so if I lean into that supposition, then it really opens things up on my roster. So I don't know that he'll make the cut. The like I said, Flacco and Brissett, and then Herbert, Darnold, Josh Allen, maybe in that order, maybe Darnold, Herbert, Josh Allen in that order are kind of the other guys that I'm seriously considering. And I was Caleb Williams, JJ McCarthy, like they were cut off like before I got down to these sort of final 5, right? So I can certainly see the story there as well. I'm not going to end up there on my tightest builds, but you brought up that one, and I just want to say, like, yeah, I can see that one. I think Caleb Williams is really going to struggle against his defense in the early going. It's going to take like a little. He's hit against Cincinnati and Dallas, and nobody else. And this is the worst possible matchup where you got a lot of too high, you got a lot of blitzes, you got a lot of confusing coverages, and that's just not his game so far. So I think that can mute the whole game environment because we've seen Kevin O'Connell kind of hold down JJ McCarthy's pass attempts until forced to take things to the air. And so that's kind of how I'm looking at this game, but very clearly it could play out in other ways.
Yeah. I think you actually hit on one of the things with Josh Allen there, that he's 7,000, and he's been more expensive. But like, how many points can a quarterback put up, right? Like, and some guys are going to have like the 5 passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown game. Josh Allen's probably had one of those games. But like, it's pretty rare for a quarterback to actually put the slate out of reach at the quarterback position at a high price tag. So like, a great score for a quarterback can be 28, 30 points. But when it's the $5,000 quarterback putting up, that 28 to 30 points, it is much more meaningful than the $7,000 quarterback who's putting up, the maximum kind of great quarterback game of 28, 30, 32 points. So that's one of the reasons why cheap quarterbacks, can do so well, like Davis Mills. So I'm actually going to talk about your 30 pointers because you mentioned, the guys that can put up 30 points. So Christian
not just
McCaffrey,
30, 40. I think we get some 40s this week.
Yeah,
I think we do.
Yeah. So 30 to 40 points. Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, JSN, Puka. I think that all makes sense. Trey McBride. Yeah, Trey McBride without a Marvin Harrison. I think, very underpriced. 2 players you didn't mention. I think Bijan Robinson. I'm not a guy I have a ton of interest. I'll probably try to be under the field on what I think will probably be low ownership. But actually, the guy that I think could be in that 30 to 40 point category that you didn't mention is Josh Jacobs, facing a Giants rush defense that allows the second most rushing touchdowns and rushing yards per game. This is a game that like Green Bay might be able to just run the ball and might want to just run the ball. And then I'm going to tie it back to the cheap quarterbacks too, because I think Jameis Winston is a guy I'm probably not going to play in single entry. This is a single entry show, but I think he's interesting especially if I'm playing Josh Jacobs. Yeah,
I started walking out onto the Jameis Winston diving board a night or 2 ago, and then it was like, do I really do I think of the confidence? What's the floor ceiling? What's the range of outcomes? What's the consistency? What's like all the factors for single entry versus Brissett and Flacco? It was like, well, these are dramatically better plays on paper, but I think that for large field play, for MME, for large field play, I think Jameis makes a lot of sense because you're just saying this dude's gonna throw the ball. Well, Darius Slayton's out too. I've maybe played Wan'Dale Robinson once ever. I just listened to Reeves and Hilo kind of poo-pooing Wan'Dale is like a lesser play than lesser ceiling some of these other plays, but I'm still like, dude, I don't know, man. I think Wan'Dale with his new coach, role expanding, no Darius Slayton, Jameis going to throw the ball downfield. I think he's very interesting this week. And so, like a Jameis plus Theo Johnson plus Wan'Dale Robinson, talk about a cheap stack that opens things up. Josh Jacobs. Yeah. So for me, he's in the 30-point discussion, but not the 40-point discussion. And so that's really the one thing. It's kind of like this, like, there's some interesting running backs like sub 6K, right? Like Woody Marks is interesting. Aaron Jones is interesting. DeAndre Swift is interesting. And then you can even go, obviously, Chase Brown, Jaylen Warren, and then you can even go off the board to like guys that you really got to stretch, Kamani Vidal, and some of these like Pete and I were talking about this on our show, like Kamani Vidal. But then it's like, well, the amount of risk you take on with Kamani Vidal of how many things have to go right against a good Jags run defense. And then it's like, what's his ceiling? He gets you 23, 25. Like there's so many good cheap running backs that somebody else is also getting up 23 to 25 with a bunch of ownership on them, right? So you're not really getting the edge. So it's kind of similar. Like when I get up to Jacobs, I'm like, yeah, but this is a week where I think we could get 40 pointers. So wouldn't I rather spend that salary on CMC, on Jamar Chase, on JSN? And so, yeah, my concern with Jacobs is we've seen them want to limit his workload. Last week he played, I think it was 70% of the snaps, maybe even more than that. He had 26 touches, more importantly, but it was a game they were trailing, or a game, I guess they weren't trailing, but it was like this competitive game against the Eagles. So my concern is the matchup's so good against the Giants, but like if the Packers are in control, does Jacobs get the full like 26 touch workload, or are we hoping that at 7,800 he puts up a monster game on like 18 to 21 touches? And so, yeah, I think 30 points is very much within his range of outcomes. And if CMC scores like 22 and Jamar Chase scores 20, which he's done several times with Flacco, and Jacob scores 30, like you're way ahead of those rosters. But in terms of ultimate ceiling, I see the ultimate ceiling on these other guys being higher. So I'm kind of prioritizing these other guys, but I'm with you. Like if this slate, what I'm getting at is if this slate shaped up differently, Josh Jacobs might be like my favorite running back on the slate. It's more, what else is available at the high end of the price range. And remember years ago, like a decade ago, Head Chopper saying, think about every roster decision, not just in terms of what it adds to your roster, but also what it takes away from your roster. And so in that context, the Jacobs component, it's like, well, it takes away from my roster is the ability to get one of these guys that I think can score 40. And that's kind of how I'm looking at him, but I think he's a great play. And so I'm not talking him down. He's going to be in my player pool. He's going to be in my player grid. I think there's like higher ceiling plays for just a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like if you're playing Josh Jacobs and he puts up 30 points, like that could be really good. That could be the score you need to have. If Christian McCaffrey puts up 40, like playing Josh Jacobs and his 30 points probably eliminates you from contention.
Yeah.
At the score that Christian McCaffrey's then putting up, at the ownership that he's likely putting it up. Like you might not even cash with, with Josh Jacobs and his 30 points. So you've mentioned the Chargers and Jacksonville a couple of times. That's a game that's like pretty much been off my radar. And I'm questioning that. I guess like sell me on the on the Jaguars and Chargers. Would you be playing it, probably from the Justin Herbert side?
Yeah.
Or do you like Travis Etienne? I guess, and there's a question if Brian Thomas is going to be back for that game as well.
Yeah, I mean, the Jags offense has been genuinely bad because of Trevor Lawrence, and so it's more like my default is this is a tremendous matchup for Herbert. Obviously, they're getting the ball out quicker. When Joe Alt's been out, they've completely transformed their offense, just ball out quick. But also, don't have a great pass rush for the Jags. And so you have the opportunity for some more like downfield developing plays for the Chargers. But my default stance is like, well, I don't think the Jags can do well against this Chargers defense, right? But then I'm like, well, I wouldn't have thought they could do well against the Chiefs defense. I wouldn't have thought they could do well against the Houston defense. And not all those points are like the Jags offense being a powerhouse. It's just like this team has found a way to score points. And so they did poorly against the Rams, against the Seahawks in their first game against Houston. I think that's the likeliest outcome is that, they score like 17 or fewer points. The Chargers aren't pushed. We don't get an elite game. But I think it's within the range of outcomes. This is such a soft matchup for Herbert. So I think it's within the range of outcomes that we do get Jacksonville just finding a way to score points, right? And then Herbert has to respond, and we get, 38 pass attempts, 42 pass attempts. He's putting up 30 DraftKings points and bringing 2 pass catchers with him, which he's done 4 times this year. So, yeah, it's definitely lower. I like Flacco. Like Flacco and Brissett are in a totally different tier to me because of the confidence I have in their performance and what they open up for your roster, and knowing which stacking partners to go to. Because even if you get Herbert right, he's going to hit with 2 guys, but you don't know which 2 guys, So Herbert's like a totally like rung or 2 down the ladder below those guys for me. But I'm just looking at like, if I bring in a 3rd, 4th quarterback, where could we get these ceiling games? And it's like, yeah, what if the Jags put up points here? If they do, Herbert's like that one thing going right, Herbert's putting up the points. So talking about it, like I probably do like Darnold more, like as the 3rd guy, and then Herbert and then Josh Allen kind of in that order. But yeah, it's not about being able to project how the Jags score points, but it's just saying maybe they figure out a way. If they do, it's great for the Chargers offense here.
So yeah, you bring up the idea of like stack certainty and the idea, and that's actually something that I'm really kind of warming up to that concept that you really need to think about that with your lineups, right? Because like, yeah, if you play, like if you play a Josh Allen, well, are you like, are you just not playing him with anybody else? Or if you're stacking him, like who are you stacking him with? Because it's a minefield. Is the certainty of stacking partners part of your thought process? Because you've mentioned you really like Joe Flacco, but I don't think you've mentioned Aaron Rodgers. Like, is that part of the reason why you like, Flacco over Rodgers, because of the maybe Jamar Chase certainty versus like trying to pick through the Steelers tight ends?
Yeah, I mean, so two parts there. Stack certainty is a massive in my thinking. And like there's been a few times this year where we've kind of touched on it on the show where it's been like, well, I don't like this guy because I don't know who to stack him with, or I don't think, and you've gone a different direction than me, and I consider you to be one of the gold standards of DFS players, And so there's been a few times where I've questioned, like, do I put too much emphasis on like stacking certainty? But to me, like the math is such a big part of like how I look at things, and the stacking certainty is such a big part of turning the math in my favor. So I've like gone back into the lab and been like, let's assess my play and see if I should adjust, because there's been a few times where like I've been on the stack certainty component and you've kind of gone in different directions. But like, maybe I'm missing something here, but it's been like, no, like I feel comfortable that this is part of my edge and how I attack things. On the Rodgers side, so on the stack certainty side, like that's a huge part of things for me, because it's like I feel so confident I'm getting two spots right with Brissett and McBride. Like that's huge. Like I don't care if they put up 40 or 50. It's like I'm just getting all these points on two spots and freeing up salary for other things. On the Rodgers, I mean, Rodgers hasn't topped 250 yards this year, and then yeah, like the Bengals kind of quietly are tremendous against wide receivers. DJ Turner's quietly been one of the top 4 or 5 cornerbacks in football this year. It's like one of the only things that the Bengals have done well on defense is stop alpha wide receivers. And so then you're like, well, so it's probably the tight ends in this spot. But then it's like, well, what do you got? You got 3 tight ends. You're going to pick and choose amongst them. And so, I think I don't have a strong argument against playing Rodgers, but Flacco, you're like, you just are hoping Flacco's bombs away. So you get the stack certainty and like the higher ceiling of 300 plus yard bonus and the touchdowns. Like Rodgers, you're just hoping that he gets a 3 or 4 score game. And that's a little bit harder for me to lean into.
So yeah, actually, I think it's maybe a good concept for the idea of single entry versus mass multi-entry, right?
Yeah, 100%,
like
100%.
Yeah, if you're playing like, you can play some Jordan Love and rotate through Packers receivers, or like, some Josh Allen and rotate through like Bills pass catchers for multi-entry, right? You're not playing a Josh Allen lineup. You're playing like maybe 10 Josh Allen lineups out of 150. Whereas for single entry, like, yeah, you want Joe Flacco and Jamar Chase, right? Like it's, unless Jamar Chase gets injured, and like T. Higgins is going to have some big games, and that's fine. And maybe you're double stacking Joe Flacco. But that's like a separate decision, because you just know Joe Flacco and Jamar Chase. And that gives you so much certainty for single entry, where you're maybe trying to beat, 500 people, 1,000 people, maybe 2,000 people, more than, trying to beat 150,000 people with some kind of like rando Davis Mills lineup. So
well,
yeah, actually,
I want to just touch on that really quickly. I think that's a really incredibly important point, because yeah, if you're playing MME, which like I never played MME until the last 3-4 years. In the last 3 years or so, like I was pretty heavy MME play, and then the thinking is totally different, because it's like, well, if Herbert hits, Herbert plus some combination of 2 pass catchers is hitting. And yes, it's hard to know which one, but somebody's going to have the right combination. So then you just mix and match all those combinations so that you're also one of the people who's getting the right combo, right? And so then that stack certainty becomes way less important, because it's more about just like, what's the ultimate ceiling? Whereas single entry 3 max, like to me, it's like, if you just have a really high floor across the board with ceiling, then like you're going to finish in the top so much more often, because like it's bouncing off. You don't know when the weeks are going to come where the ceiling comes together, but it's going to have this high floor to bounce off of, And so, single entry 3 max, which this year, I think weeks 1 and 2, I was still MME. And then it was like, I want to just play single entry 3 max this year, to shift it back to that. And so stack certainty has become way more important to me. Whereas in MME, it's more like, it's like, yeah, I don't care that it's uncertain here, because if it hits, somebody's going to have the right combo, and I want to be that somebody. So let me mix and match to make sure that I get that combo. So yeah, I think that's a very important point to highlight. Technically a single entry show. This show started at Roto Grinders. It was their idea of like, hey, do a single entry show between you two. And it's become much more like a chance for us to talk through the slate holistically and then narrow it down to single entry. So yeah, from a single entry stance, that stack certainty, I think, is a huge component of things.
So yeah, in the interest of, getting some holistic view of the slate, just we have two games we didn't mention at all. They're both divisional rivalries in the middle totals of the week. Carolina at Atlanta and Kansas City at Denver, two different, very different environments. Kansas City at Denver actually has the higher total. I'd be probably more inclined to go indoors and play the play the
100%.
Carolina.
Yeah.
Atlanta game. I know. I think from those two games, I'm interested in Drake London. Probably as a one-off, like not really that interested in the quarterbacks. For single entry or multi-entry. Any interest in those two games?
Yeah, I mean, I think Rico Dowdle, like I said, is
Dowdle.
One of these guys who can score significantly outperform his salary. So I think he can score. He's done 35 in 2 of his 3 starts, 31 in another. And then I like the Drake London call because you look at it and you're like, I don't think he'll do well against this Panther secondary that's really good against wideouts. But it's like, well, he's had some other spots like that too. The thing about him is he doesn't create separation. So it actually matters less when he's facing a really tough defense because it's just about him getting the ball and making these tight window catches. And like we saw him against the Patriots, they used stack formations and motion and stuff to get him off Christian Gonzalez and on a Marcus Jones a bunch. But he also had a touchdown catch against Christian Gonzalez where like Gonzalez was plastered to him. And Drake London's just like, cool, I'll just reach out and catch it one-handed. Like you can't reach this ball. It's me or nobody, and I can make the catch. And so I think that he's a unique player in that you can play him in these spots where you're like, the matchup's not great for wide receivers, but it's like, well, as long as the targets are there, he can hit. So, I'm with you on that. I think this 7K range is interesting because Ibuka is interesting against defense. Has been bad against wide receiver ones. Justin Jefferson's interesting. Drake London's interesting. And so, like, Chase and JSN are these shining beacons up there. And I know Puka's also in the mix. And so we really want to get up to there. But then it's also kind of like, am I overlooking things in this range? And so, I think we could get 1 or even 2 30-pointers from this, like 6.7K to 7.5K, and Nico Collins up to Justin Jefferson type range.
Yeah. All right. So I think we covered the games. Sorry. I'll just like add in there. I'm a total Rico Dowdle supporter this week. I averaged 29.7 DraftKings points in games where he's been like the lead back. I forgot about him as part of what I would be interested in the, Carolina Atlanta game. But yeah, that pretty much wraps us up. Any final thoughts on the week? Yeah,
we didn't touch on Chase Brown and Jaylen Warren. Do you have any quick thoughts on those guys?
I do. I think I like Chase Brown more without seeing Ajay Pirine just because of the Bengals' tendency to like just go with one back.
Yeah.
And then Chase Brown now does the receiving. So, and he's pretty affordably priced at $5,700. I get a little bit worried about Jaylen Warren. Playing a lot of Jaylen Warren, and it's conceivably a much better matchup than Kenneth Gainwell just gets 3 touchdowns.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So I think running back certainty like leads me to Chase Brown and taking the savings, but I think Jaylen Warren will be one of my higher owned running backs as well. I mean, he might be the top, on paper running back for the price this week.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I prefer Jaylen Warren in Flacco stacks where you're just betting on the game. And then Chase Brown, he had last year when he had like all the snaps after Zach Moss got hurt, he had 13 points against Denver and Cleveland. And other than that, 19 to 25 in every other game. And so I think he lands right in that range again, because he's involved in the pass. He's going to get some carries and going to be on the field for probably every snap. So I'm with you on that. Chase Brown over Jaylen Warren, both viable and valuable, and also a bunch of other cheap running backs who are interesting. No other notes from me. I'm excited about this week. I think it's a week to think about how many of these like elite plays you can fit in targeting 30 to 40 point scores. Cause I think we're going to have a barrage of players scoring 30 to 40 this week. And you want to try to get 4 or 5 of those onto a roster and figure out how to make that happen. That's my angle on the week. So I'll leave you guys with that.
Yeah. I'll add, like, almost every week I start my roster with quarterback and think about, all right, now who do I want to stack them with? This really might be a week more where I'm saying, okay, of the high priced guys, like which 1 or 2 do I want to like get into my roster and then, build a game environment around that. But yeah, that'll do it for this week. Good luck to everybody on Sunday, and we will catch you all next week.